Alright, welcome back. So now we're going to do the board. So let's switch on over to the board. We can just type in board here and we can see all our devices. Let's turn on the grid. If you haven't already, or hopefully you guys did this earlier, make sure you have your size to 1 or your grid to 1 millimeter, alt 0.5. Let's go ahead and set the dimensions for the board. So info, this is the X and this is the Y. So the Y is 0.59 inch. So I must have made it 15 millimeters. And then the width is 1.5 inch, so it must have been about 38 millimeters. So we make it really tiny. Let's set this setting. It's going to be 38. Cool. So very, very tiny. If you're designing a PCB from scratch and you're just deciding how to make your project, hopefully there is some sort of constraint. And in this case, our constraint is mechanical, which it generally is when you design most boards. So if you notice here, the DRC is yelling at us for some really close things, and that's because we need to set our design rules. So to do that, we'll type in DRC. If you guys watch the Eagle videos, then you should know that we're going to use the Oshpark one. So design rules, Oshpark, 2-layer board. Alright, so it tells us we have errors. That's obvious because we haven't routed anything yet. But now when we put this here, it should be a lot easier. And for my grid, I have it on 0.5. So I want this to be closely aligned with this as possible. A little too much, so we can do grid alt 0.1. This will change the grid a little bit. That's good. So we want the right thumbstick to be on the right side. And in a similar manner, we want this to be aligned just like that. If you want to check their symmetry, you can do info, click on the device, the X position and Y position. So we're looking for 8 and then 8. If we want, we can center this here. So minus 19, positive 19, and then we will probably want to center it this way as well. About center, probably off a little bit. So 7 and 8. So let's do grid alt 0.5, group, and move it up by 1, or down by 1. 7.5, 7.5, good. So now it's perfectly centered. So now when we look at these, 0.5 minus 16.3, 0.5, 16.3. So they're perfectly symmetric. If we want to make it even, let's just go ahead and move this down 0.5. And now we're guaranteed that this is perfectly aligned and symmetrical. Alright, next thing we're going to add is the Bluetooth. And we want this to be perfectly aligned on the y-axis to be 0. So let's double check that. Or on the x-axis, excuse me. And we can see that because the origins are aligned. And then let's go ahead and move this down. Change our grid alt to 0.1, hold down alt, bring it down a little bit. I want to move these closer so that when I do my zoom to fit, it doesn't take me further away. Let's double check where our jumpers are, or there we go, it kind of tells us. So this jumper is on this side, something like that. This jumper is on this side, something like that. We'll set them later, but I'm just trying to push everything to where it should go. For the switch, I want this to be perfectly centered. So when I normally design things, I don't want the T keep out that I have here to go through this right here. In this case, I have it go through a little bit on my original design. If you decide to use this in a different project, getting too close to this may affect you. But since I've made this and printed it out and I know how it'll appear, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit, but I encourage that you do not until you're more comfortable designing boards. So that should be in the spot that I want it to be, or very close to. And I'm trying to build the exact board I did. The dimensions should be perfect, but everything else might be slightly off. I kind of want to drop the 8 tiny next. And you'll notice as you start to place things, you'll probably have to massage things around. That's just part of the design phase. I have this guy in the corner with ground in this corner, something like that. And we'll massage it around in a moment. The 8 tiny has the capacitor. Oh, whoop. In our board, we forgot to add the capacitor. It should have one though. So let's go ahead and add that now. That was my mistake. 0.1 microfarad cap, 0805, net, connect, copy the ground. There we go. And the original reason I came here is to see what the name of the capacitor was. So it's C3. So I'll type move C3. And there it is. Align it with 3.3 volts. I encourage you guys to check out the data sheet. It'll tell you to put that 0.1 microfarad capacitor. And here's the data sheet, and it'll tell you that in general for any microcontroller or just devices in general, that the cap should be as close to the IC as possible. Alright, so it's kind of pushing into here, so that tells me I should push this out a little bit, and as long as our T keep out doesn't interfere with each other. It should be fine. Then we'll move this closer. I'm going to do rat's nest to reset the air wire, and I want these to be as closely aligned as possible. That looks good. They're not crossing. It's not crossing here. It's not crossing here. So we'll leave that as is for now. You can put this close here. It'll mess up our silk screen, but that should be okay. We might be able to move it down a little bit or up a little bit. Doesn't really matter. The jumper is going to have to squeeze in here somewhere. On ours, I think I put it here. So I'm going to push this guy up a little bit. Alright, that looks fine. We'll come back to it if we need to. Let's go ahead and add our battery next. That's good. Alright, let's go ahead and do our LEDs next. We have LED 1 and LED 2. This is our green one. And then their respective resistors. Oh, this is the reset resistor. And then this resistor goes to the LED. Make sure they're not too close. I'm going to push these guys up pretty far. Here. Should be good. The DRC isn't yelling at me. Should be fine. I'm going to do a rat's nest now so that everything readjusts. That's good. So this is going to connect here, which will make sense with our power supply. We're going to put it right here. And this jumper is going to go somewhere over here probably. Let's go ahead and move all of these closer. So the power supply, the input voltage needs to come from the switch. So the way power is going to flow, we have our battery here, and 7.4 volts is going to flow through the switch. I mean, once we actuate it, and then it'll come out here. We want to connect to this guy, but before that, it needs to go through the capacitor. So N8 to N8. I'm going to do a rat's nest so it readjusts, and then the output cap goes on the output. Let's line these up. Here we are. Looks a little off for some reason, but that's fine. It's probably the size of the cap. And then this turns out to be pretty darn close, but I want this to be as direct as possible. So I want to move this group up a little bit. And then that makes a perfect spot for our jumper. Rats. We have everything placed on our board. So in the next one, we'll start routing.